Hello, my name is Zane, and today I will be covering Time Period 2. This takes place within the years 1607 through 1754. These were the early development days of the original 13 British North American colonies. Over time, though, as they've grown, we've seen many different events take place with very common themes. One of such is salutary neglect. This was when the British government didn't enforce their laws on the American colonies, and they were given a chance to self-govern and regulate. One example is Jamestown. This was founded in 1607 by English colonists and was funded by the Virginia Company of London. They arrived on May 13th to find gold, water, and a route to Asia for trade and expansion. This expedition was led by John Smith, and the town over time eventually grew as a colony. Another example is Roger Williams, who had founded Providence, Rhode Island in the year 1636. He was known for advocating heavily and enforcing the rights of religious liberty and separation of the church and the state. He wanted individualism and self-ideas rather than religious conformity. One person very similar to Williams, probably even gaining some inspiration, is William Penn. He was an English Quaker looking for expansion. He also heavily advocated for religious freedom and representation of his people. William Penn had founded Pennsylvania in the year 1681 after he was given a land grant of 45,000 square miles from King Charles II. From gathering the information, it is well to say that the colonies definitely have grown a lot, independently especially, though few may ask, how did religion get so tied up within the whole mix? This would eventually bring us up to our next topic, covering the Great Awakening. This was the time of the great religious revival that had swept through the colonies between the years 1730s through the 1770s. Many groups were divided as well, but there was also a creation of new groups and religions that helped to reshape and reestablish the church and other various views within the 13 states. The Glorious Revolution took place in 1688 through 1689. This was a growth in social and political views as King James III was overthrown by William of Orange. King James was Catholic and had different views from William and his wife, who were both Protestants. When they were overthrown and were to replace King James, this had resulted in the Bill of Rights of 1869, firmly establishing a parliament, free elections, and freedom of speech, but mainly to limit royal power. Another example of the Great Awakening could be the Salem witch trials. This took place in Salem, Massachusetts, from 1692 to 1693. The minister of the church, Samuel Parris, would preach to the public on devil influence, warning of spiritual dangers, and witchcraft upon the local townspeople, mainly targeting women and children, but a couple men were accused as well. The victims accused were lynched, and this process kept going up until the governor's wife was eventually called upon. Then the governor finally put an end to all of it, stopping all of the trials. A third event that is linked with the Great Awakening could be the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War, which is the same event just told from different perspective. This war had started in 1754 and contributed to a growing sense of unity and resistance against the British rule. This led to new religious groups, like Baptists and Methodists, along with shared religion across the colonies. The war eventually ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1763. With the Great Awakening opening up new religious revival within the states, they had also developed economic systems, such as mercantilism. Mercantilism was a system where the parent country applies strict control over trade in order to increase the wealth. What is found within the colonies, such as gold and silver, would be to benefit the country. Navigation acts were eventually made and were set on requirements on transport and the sale of American goods. One example would be the Molasses Act. This had took place in 1733 as a British law that imposed taxes on molasses from foreign countries. This supported the British merchants and planters. The event overall was intended to be a major event, but the enforcement was fairly ineffective due to widespread smuggling and bribery, so this was highly ignored for decades. The Sugar Act, which had replaced the Molasses Act over time, had happened in 1764. This was a tax that had been passed by the British Parliament to raise revenue after the French and Indian War. The law was passed by the Prime Minister, George Granville, and was aimed to stop the smuggling of sugar and molasses, specifically from the French and the Dutch West Indies. This overall was to increase the income for the British Empire. This was opposed by colonists because the colonists were already struggling and they had seen this as a form of taxation without representation. The people had felt that it was unfair to be taxed by someone that they aren't even able to vote for. They had also used sugar and molasses to make rum, which was one main export of trade. Overall, this had left a negative impact on their economy for years to come. One last example could be the Navigation Acts. This event was sponsored by John Shaw and was a law that was passed in the year 1660. This was because the British Parliament wanted to gain more wealth from the North American colonies. The laws that were imposed had controlled the trade system. This had required that all manufactured goods heading into the colonies had to only be carried on the English ships, along with foreign products that they were soon heavily taxed upon. This had upset the colonists because they were forced to exclusively trade only with England, limiting their resources, and were forced with higher payments. Over time, this caused severe instability and a lack of loyalty, soon causing the colonists to begin thinking about their own independence, which would soon contribute and influence some ideas of the American Revolution. These were some of the major events that happened within this time period. We have seen growth in religion, the economy, as well as the 13 colonies overall. If I were to give myself advice in the beginning of the year, I would tell myself to review daily on what I've learned throughout the week, because the chances of them being brought up the next class are very high. I would have also told myself to plan my week more accordingly. With the amount of work that's given to me, it's best to finish it all early rather than letting it pile up and turning it all in last second. Over the course of the year, though, I will say I have learned so much along with a lot more info. I do not have any regrets taking this class, and I'm very grateful that I was able to intake all of the information that was given to me. And so, that was my video covering time period 2. Again, the years 1607 through 1754. Thank you.